Hi, I'm Zeff Reeves, Managing Director of Tesoro Gold. Tesoro is developing the exciting Alzaro gold project in the Atacama region of Chile.
Zeff, good to see you again. You haven't been on Crux for 3 or 4 months, actually 4 or 5 months now. You've had a busy start to the year. Summarise, please, what you've bagged so far this year.
Yeah, I think since last time we spoke, there's been quite a bit of activity. Obviously, at the end of last year, we had a significant capital raising. We raised $8 million, and a large portion of that money came from a cornerstone investment from Goldfields Limited. So Goldfields had been doing their homework on the company and the asset for quite a while, and made a decision that they'd like to get involved. So they contributed around about half of the capital of that $8 million cap raising, and they currently sit at just under 15% of the issued capital of Tesoro. And then off the back of that funding, we kicked off drilling again at Ternera. We've been doing some extensional holes. We've probably due to announce some assay results on that very soon on some of those holes, and we're continuing to delineate new targets to the north of Ternera, which we're going to start drilling in the very near future as well. And we also completed an updated mineral resource estimate. So the global resource now is at Ternera, or the unconstrained resource, is close to 1.7 million ounces, but within an optimised $1,800 an ounce optimised pit, we're sitting at about 1.3 million ounces. The grade's nudged up a bit as well. But importantly, a lot of that resource is now into an indicated classification. And then off the back of that resource update, we had been working away on a scoping study, and we've also just recently announced that scoping study with which demonstrates some pretty attractive metrics around Ternera to build a standalone gold mine. And I guess there's a few key takeaways from that scoping study. One is the all-in sustaining costs we're estimating to be a little over $1,000 US an ounce. And that scoping study produces a modest MPV around 200 million US pre-tax. And but it essentially pays back all the capex to build a 2.5 million tonne per annum plant, and it only mines approximately half of that resource. So essentially every ounce that we add into Ternera and the broader project area from now on in is essentially the capex is being paid for that, and if we just have to apply that all in sustaining cost to it. So we've been moving along on a number of fronts, as you can see, and Alzaro is stacking up to be a really nice project, and we're confident that it's going to be a mine there in the not too distant future.
Zeff, thank you. I kind of set you up for a long answer by asking what you've been up to over the last five months. But let's break it down a bit, and let's kind of get into each of those components one by one. First of all, Goldfields. What were they? What are they looking for? When you have internal conversations with you, do they see you as a kind of a stalking horse for doing exploration in Chile? What are their internal metrics and thresholds that they need to see before they kind of invest in a company?
Yeah, I think a number of things. One is they want to see a company that's got a good set of exploration skills and skill sets, being able to execute and demonstrate the execution of finding gold deposits, as well as the highly prospective ground package. Obviously we've proven that there's a significant gold system at Alzaro. We've got Ternera sitting at their 1.3 million ounces, but obviously through some of the other releases that we've made around our mapping and district work, we've demonstrated that this is a very large gold system, and I think I've said it before, we're very optimistic and that there's another Ternera or maybe two sitting on the property. So Goldfields did a very detailed and long due diligence. They spent a lot of time with all of their internal specialists looking at our technical data and the region more broadly before they decided to get involved. And I think for Goldfields, traditionally, they don't necessarily go for mega-sized deposits, but I guess their sweet spot's probably somewhere in the 2 to 5 million or 2 to 6 million ounce range for deposit size or project size. They're just up the road developing the Salares Norte mine, which has got permitted at the beginning of last year. They've made a decision to build that, so that's currently being constructed. It's only around 80 k's from us as the crow flies, but it's up in the Andes. And I suppose they like Alzaro for the reasons that Tesoro likes Alzaro. It's located in, if you want to build a gold mine, there's no better place in the world to build it. We've got power, we've got water. It's located next to the coast. We've got a workforce. It's on Crown land. It's got easy access. It's at low altitude. And it, as demonstrated by that scoping study we've just announced, it's a very straightforward open pit mining scenario with exceptional metallurgy. So all those things all stack up to a project that they wanted to get involved in. And I suppose on the corporate side, they probably see Chile as a country where there's still a lot of opportunity to find deposits in that sweet spot that they like, I guess. So they're becoming much more active in Chile. They've made some other investments in some other junior companies, one out of Canada that's got ground near their Salares Norte mine and us more or less at the same time. So, they're really making a concerted effort to get active in Chile, which is a good endorsement of the operating environment over there.
Well, let's touch on that because I've been looking at Chile a lot recently. I'm actively looking at a new project there, and there was all this kind of stuff about the lithium. Kind of Chile's going to nationalize its lithium, which came out about 3 weeks ago, and then we've just had some council elections last weekend, which are kind of a shift to the right. Do you want to just kind of give me your take on perhaps the lithium strategy, how that impacts other minerals, investor perception, and the elections? Kind of a macro view of Chile, please, from you.
Yeah, I was actually in Chile when the lithium news came out from the president there, and I think it's important that people understand that some of the reporting in the English-speaking press has been inaccurate, I guess, and the whole lithium conversation around nationalising lithium is an idea from a politician. It's a long way from being legislated. It's a long way from even being presented to the parliament, and it's important for the listeners to understand about Chile's current government is that they don't have control of the Senate either. That is controlled by the more conservative side of politics, if you like. And it'd be highly unlikely that a proposal like this would get through the Senate and actually be legislated. So, I'd liken it to, if you're an Australian, any of the Australian listeners, it'd be like the Prime Minister of Australia coming out and saying, I've got an idea to scrap Medicare, and then nothing will happen because he's got no chance of that ever being approved. So it's almost like that, and that's the way we viewed it. So, that's the whole idea is an idea, a political idea to perhaps garner some support from the electorate.
I think another thing which hasn't been reported in the West at all is that lithium is a special case within Chile anyway. I mean,
that's correct. Yeah.
It was in 1979. It was deemed of strategic military interest because of potential link to the nuclear industry, and it's effectively been state controlled since 1979, and to the point that there are only 2 concessions in Chile that have ever been granted by the. It needs a special decree from the President of the Republic.
To even take it into production, and then the Chilean government has like a first right of refusal to buy that lithium carbonate and for it to be marketed through the government. And they've never taken up that right on any of the projects that are production. And, there's other things that go on in Chile that make it hard to believe that this would happen. So it was probably 12 months ago, Codelco, the government-owned copper miner, who've also got large tracts of some of the lithium brine concessions across the Maricunga, the Salar Maricunga and the Atacama Salar and so on, where these high lithium brines exist. We're actually going through a process, so the government was going through a process to divest Codelco of the lithium assets. So they were trying to attract foreign investment to buy the lithium assets, and then 12 months down the track, we have that president turning around with an idea in his head to nationalise it. So, same government, same president, two completely opposing ideas within a 12-month period. So, I think it's just part of the political rhetoric in Chile. It's got a long way before, and if it did become legislated, and obviously it's got no impact at all on the gold industry, and it's probably going to just be snuffed out in the parliament, I would say. And that and a similar type of thing happened with the proposed increase in copper tax on the large copper producers. They started off talking about over a certain level of production, taxing copper producers at 40% on top of the already existing tax burden, which would take the tax burden up to something like 60 or 70% or something. The current legislation that's being debated in their parliament is an increase in tax for producers only over 100,000 tonnes per annum of copper of an additional 4% of their tax burden. So that would still put the tax burden considerably less than if their same mine was operating in Australia. But the world, or in Canada, but the English-speaking world's gone crazy about reporting these types of things, and it gets a bit frustrating for as a person operating a company trying to do business in Chile, when there's quite a lot of sensationalist reporting around some of these political ideas, and they're being reported as though they're set in stone already.
Well, then it's also worth mentioning the elections last weekend. So on the Sunday, it was on the 7th. So the elections, I think that was a Sunday, and that was a kind of a really significant step to the right, wasn't it? The Conservative. The right-wing Republican Party won 22 out of 50 seats on the council. Other right-wing coalitions won another 11 seats, and the left-wing coalition, of which Boric is the president, is kind of the leader of, their seat number fell to 17. So they've actually lost the right to veto anything. So the country has taken the country has had a kind of a resounding vote for conservative policies focused on economic liberalisation and creation of jobs. I mean, it's crystal clear. And foreign investment.
Yeah, and foreign investment. Yeah, that's right. And I think, and that's a result of the damage that was done off the original Constitutional Committee, which had some fairly outlandish ideas and probably got confused about what should be in a constitution and what should have probably been a legislated law or tried to be legislation. And the public, I think the general consensus in Chile and the people that I talk to, everyone from our our managers in country through to our field assistants who are more of the regional from regional places like Copiapó and so on are all giving the similar message that it was farcical what was done in that first committee, and people don't trust them anymore, hence this big shift to the right.
Good. Well, thank you. I mean, it was a little digression to kind of the macro view of Chile, but let's get back to Tesoro. Your scoping study, I had a look at it. I was a bit surprised not to see any post-tax numbers. You come out with a pre-tax NPV and a pre-tax IRR.
Yeah, and can you look? We had a lot of internal discussion around that, and we thought it best to leave it out to keep it simple, really. because we don't know what the ultimate tax rate will be for this project. For a number of reasons, the way we structure capital being contributed to the project through the CapEx period, and how those funds are, I guess, repatriated or redistributed to shareholders from any operating mine, and that has a pretty major bearing on the ultimate tax rate. But it's probably important for listeners to understand, at the moment in Chile, there's no royalties, and the only tax rate that they need to probably consider when looking at our numbers would be a corporate tax rate on profit, which is currently sitting at around 22%. So outside of that, there's no other taxation considerations except for the CapEx that we go to recover is essentially tax-free. So that's for X amount of time in the production schedule, because that capital has to be recovered back to the parent company here in Australia and potentially distributed to our shareholders. So there's a few moving parts to all of that, and I think to include that in the actual scoping study documents would have created, I guess, some confusion and uncertainty around it. So rather than publish something that we were guessing at, we decided to just leave it as a pre-tax MVP.
When I saw that and I looked at the so your capex is 132 million US and your NPV is 201 US to NPV 5. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Pre-tax NPV 5, and kind of the mental process I had was, well, that's probably going to be somewhere close to the NPV 7.5 or NPV 8 at post-tax is probably going to be close to 1-to-1 in terms of the capex to the NPV. It's just kind of what I had in my head.
Yeah, and I suppose the flip side of that is that it was done on the $1,750 gold price as well. So, it's always the way in early stage studies and scoping studies where you're having numbers which are inputs such as the gold price and the discount rate, for example. That different people use different numbers.
In your introduction, you captured a concept which I quite like, which was that it pays back the capital, and it only targets 640,000 ounces or whatever it is, 620,000 ounces of the potential. So that in some ways, what you're really saying is that the value of the project is in the life beyond the planned 8 years and the ounces beyond the first capture.
Yeah. So currently in that scoping study, it produces, or the production schedule only takes into account half of the resource that we currently have. And basically what we wanted to do is demonstrate that even with that modest production schedule, so it produces, I think on average, off the top of my head, it was 93,000 ounces per year for 8 years, but it repays the capex in just over 3 years. At $1,750 an ounce with that 5% discount rate, the NPV is roughly 200 million US. And, the flip side of, I've had this conversation with a number of people about, why did you use 5 and so on. Well, 5's probably the benchmark for most companies publishing these things on the ASX. But we did use $1,750 an ounce. And if we add $50, for every $50 US, the gold price is above $1,750, it adds another 20 million US to the pre-tax NPV. So, we're sitting $250, nearly $300 above what the gold price that we use. So, it swings and roundabouts, I guess, at this early stage of studies. But the one of the main driving reasons, I guess, that we wanted to get this information out in the market, we wanted to demonstrate that this project is real and it can produce gold. The production cost, the all-in sustaining cost, is down at around that $1,000 US an ounce, and then it pays back the capex, and then every ounce that we add to this or we add into a future production schedule, it doesn't have the capex burden on it. So as we continue to grow this project, then people can go away and use those metrics to start to critique the project themselves.
Why didn't you wait until the end of this year when you're going to do your scoping study update? I mean, and what was the... Did you really feel you needed to get that out so soon? Rather, I mean, couldn't you have just done kind of one scoping study rather than kind of giving an update?
Yeah, it's a flip side, because some investors, and particularly a lot of the institutional guys, want to have that information, and they ask us constantly, and we can't talk about it. So now we can talk about it, and we're happy to talk about it. And one of the other main driving reasons is that in Chile, it's a straightforward process, and I would argue that it's probably easier to get a mine permitted in Chile than it is in Western Australia, but it takes a long time. It's a very prescriptive process, and you just have to go through all the steps. And so we wanted to start that, and part of that is that you have to submit a mine plan and a production schedule and a production target to the authorities. And the other thing that we are in the process of doing is, because all the gold's going to be ultimately exported out of Chile and sold outside of Chile, the company can apply for an exporter status now, and it needs to submit a business plan to the government. And what the exporter status allows us to do is to recover all of the sales tax or VAT tax that we pay on everything that we spend money on, except for direct labour in Chile. So the scoping studies allowed us to do that, as well as talk about, the potential economics of the project.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. In your quarterly report, you also talk about doing an update to the scoping study in Q4 of this year. What's going to be new in that? When's the cutoff on the new data that goes into that, and what is that new data going to consist of?
There's no hard and fast cutoff on that. So there's some additional drilling that is that we've been doing at Ternera that we started in January. So that'll get in there, and we've got more holes planned. But what we would like to do is to have enough of the, indicated material and some further resource growth that's able to support a larger production schedule, as in more ounces per year produced. So that means converting more material to indicated. And the other, so we'd like to sort of get up to around total production profile over 8 years, 800,000 ounces, essentially. Now, something that we've been looking at, and it needs a little bit more work from an engineering and modelling perspective, is looking at an underground potential, because the current scoping study is a fairly shallow pit. It basically mines the top 200 metres of the deposit. But beneath that pit, and to the side of it as well, is some beautiful, big, wide, high-grade zones that pit doesn't mine. And we're having a good close look at remodelling those to even sort of push the grade up a bit more and stitch all that together a bit better. And obviously, as you could appreciate, there's a reasonable amount of work to go into, including an underground portion to a future financial model. So that all that work's already commenced. We're doing that, but essentially we would hope that underground component will be the main material difference between what we've just released and what we may release later in the year.
And extensions to the south, has that been something that you'll be able to do, is kind of pull the pit further to the south? I think you've just
so something that we've picked up and our exploration team have sort of done a lot of work on over the last probably 12 months is there's quite a large district scale fault which we've called the Dorado fault that runs through the middle of Ternera, and it goes continues to the south and also goes all the way up to the north through the targets to the north, Kitsuni, and up into Calderillas. That fault is always anomalous in gold, and it's not a single fault, it's actually a large fault zone that varies in width from, say, 10 metres to up to 100 metres wide. It's got a very large alteration zone around it. But what our team has discovered is that fault is often mineralised. So traditionally at Ternera, most of the gold's hosted within the intrusive rocks. But where this fault goes through the host sediments, we often see some good zones of mineralisation forming as well. And generally those zones aren't as wide as they'd be if they were in the intrusive rocks, but they're generally very high grade. So we've some of the drilling that we've just completed actually has been trying to locate that fault as it comes south. We think that it continues for quite a distance south, so we've been drilling some holes there. There's some shallow cover as we come down into the valley there, so have that to contend with. But we'll have some assays for those holes fairly soon, I would have thought.
Good. So kind of looking forward to kind of the news flow through the course of the year, it'll be the assays from the holes that you've drilled so far, and then ongoing exploration drilling. Will you be getting up to Kitsuni and the other targets in the north during the course of this year?
Yeah, so we've actually just moved the drill rig to Kitsuni, so that's about to start. They haven't started drilling yet, but they're very close to drilling. It's pretty imminent. So we've got 10 holes planned to be drilled up there. First 6 will definitely get drilled. Got a big area to test, like the gold footprint up at Kitsuni is substantially larger than Ternera, and there's a lot of intrusive up there, and that Dorado fault goes straight through the middle of it all. And you can see the alteration for quite a few 100 metres each side. So we're the team on site are very optimistic at getting some good results out of there. So we'll have those results, in another month or two's time once that drilling's underway. Drill results out of Ternera as well, obviously.
The Kitsuni is a potential kind of Ternera lookalike.
Yeah, that's right. It's got, that's the model that we've been using for Kitsuni, although this new sedimentary hosted gold has also got potential to be up through Kitsuni, especially where the Dorado fault goes through. But I think we previously announced surface sampling results from Kitsuni, and you can see the gold footprint in those announcements. There's some maps in there, and the most recent presentation as well has got quite a good map in there showing, I guess, the gold prospective zone. But there's a lot of intrusive at surface there. It's generally always mineralised. There's some quite good numbers at surface. So the guys have planned some holes there. There's been a bit of work to get up there with earth moving and access tracks and so on, but they've managed to get all that in, and we'll be starting to drill there hopefully by the weekend, the way things are going.
Good. So that's potentially it could kind of fire up the material exploration change, because what I feel at Ternera is that there's it's kind of incremental exploration, whereas at Kitsuni
I guess one of the things that we've always struggled with the project is what's the scale going to be, because we still haven't found the ends of Ternera. On the drilling footprint at Ternera, we can clearly see a pathway to a couple of million ounces and beyond. In the announcement on the resource update, we had an exploration target in there for Ternera as well that's been done, and that's based solely on the drilled footprint to date. It doesn't include any of the big step outs and extensions. We're optimistic that deposit will be beyond 2 million ounces with more drilling. And then what happens if Kitsuni, all of a sudden, the first drill program has a few holes that are 50 metre near surface intercepts at 2 or 3 grams, similar material that we see out of Ternera, then all of a sudden we've got potentially another 2 million ounces plus potential deposit on our hands. So we've always struggled for we know we've got, the smallest scale this will ever be will be what we announced in the scoping study. The biggest scale, I don't know yet.
Well, that's a good position to be in. Do you feel that Tesoro is trading at a discount to its Australian peers with projects in Australia? Do you feel that there's a kind of a lack of understanding of Chile and a kind of a jurisdiction risk that's being applied, or a discount?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the issues that we say is, and I've always said this, is that the Pacific Ocean creates a barrier for particularly the Australian investment community investing in projects in Chile. And I think a lot of Chile gets thrown into the South American basket, and rather than Chile being looked at and assessed as a standalone country, it's like South America. It's high risk. It's like Argentina. It's like Colombia or any other place in South America. But I keep banging on about it. Chile's is the world's biggest copper producer. It's got a long history of permitting large mines, and attracting foreign investment to be able to finance those mines. And there's been recent investments by significant companies and recent projects that have just been permitted in Chile, which completely support that and underline the importance and the ease of doing business in the mining industry in Chile. So BHP have made a major investment expanding Escondida. South 32 have just last year brought half of Cerro Casales. Anglo have just been permitted a major expansion for the underground at Teniente, and that is a huge. That was controversial due to where it's at, and that's just been permitted, and they're going to proceed with that, and that's a $6 billion investment. Salares Norte has just been permitted by the government as well. So all these things continue to go on and continue to tick the boxes, and in the meantime in Australia, these projects are getting stuck in the quagmire of permitting, but apparently it's better over here in Australia than it is in Chile. So, there's only so much you can say and do, and these big companies aren't going there to because of the jurisdictional risk. They're going there because they can get things done, and there's a long history and a long track record of attracting foreign investment and building those projects. So, I think it's a great place to operate. It's very easy to get stuff done. We've got access to everything as well. We don't see the same supply constraints still now that we do in an escalation in exploration costs and development costs that we see in Australia either. So, it's a absolutely fantastic place to go and build a mine.
And do you see that you just by plugging away, you'll reduce the discount to your peers? Is it just a matter of time and education?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, we potentially won't get full value, but we're starting to see a lot of interest out of North American investors as well, which have been doing business in South America for a long time, and they understand all of that. And I think once we see some of that money coming in to our register as well, we may see the stock get revalued. Obviously, there's been a quite an uptick in the share price recently. I'm saying probably a bit more money coming back into the gold junior sector as well in the last month to 6 weeks, I guess, on the ASX. We're starting to see a few of the other gold companies get a bit of an uptick. So, I think we were talking before we went live that there's this disconnect between a magnificent gold price and the actual money that's coming into gold companies. So, who knows what the market will do, but certainly the sentiment looks to be turning, a bit more in our favour.
Well,
and those headwinds may start to dissipate.
I think the headwinds may start to dissipate, but if you can pull out some mineralised core from Kitsune, I think you might find yourself with a tailwind.
Yeah, well, that's right. And look, I always say to all of our shareholders and any potential new investors and people that we talk to, we're in a pretty envious position, really. We've got a 1.3 million ounce and growing deposit sitting in the middle of a, well mineralized gold belt. So we've got, the base assets already there, but we've still got all the exploration potential and upside. So we've got this two-pronged approach which we can run in parallel and continue to create value.
Zeff, go get them. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Melon.